We are going to be covering a lot of history in this project. We're going to be learning about history. So today I am going to try to present 400 years of US history in one class. Am I going to explain everything? No. It's impossible to explain 400 years of history in one class. But I am going to try to give you some important information so that you know what happened during different times in the United States. In your project, you will have to research what was happening at that time in the United States as well. So you will have to do more research, and we will explain what you will have to do with that research afterwards. So to start off, 400 years of US history. Here are the different parts of US history that we are going to look at. I have divided it into 6 important periods of US history. The first one is pre-independence. So what do you think happened in pre-independence? That's before the United States was a country. That's where indigenous people lived there, when other things were happening in the country. Then US Revolution. The US Revolution is the name, yes?
I'd say the pre-independence.
Pre-independence? What happened in pre-independence?
The Americans.
For independence. That's when the United States became a country and it gained independence from the British, from the United Kingdom. Okay? That's the second period that we're going to study. Then is the Civil War. A civil war. Do you know what a civil war is? Can somebody explain what a civil war is? Sorry?
A war in a country, like two sides fighting for one thing, what they think is.
So it's a war inside a country, right? It's not between two different countries. It's a war inside a country over something, okay? And we are going to look at what that something was. The fourth thing that we are going to study is something that happened all over the world, but it really started in the United States. And we're going to see how that one thing that started in the United States affected the whole world. That is the Great Depression, okay? Next, we're going to study the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement. Do you know what rights are? Yeah, so the rights that people have. We're going to study who was fighting during the civil rights movement and what they were trying to get. And finally, we're going to look at contemporary history. Contemporary means happening right now. So things that have happened in the last 10, 20, 30 years that are really happening right now. So those are the time periods that we are going to be studying. Different periods that we are going to be studying. Okay? Just so that you can look at them. Right now, we are here, now. And we'll be doing contemporary issues, starting from 2001 to now. Before that, the civil rights, the Great Depression, the US Civil War, the US Revolution, and pre-independence. Okay. Pre-independence, we're starting at 1620. People were living in what is now the United States for many, many years before that. But I will explain why we are starting with pre-independence. Okay. This is the timeline, and we can go back to it later. But let's start with pre-independence. Pre-independence. The first thing that you need to know is that people were in the United States already for thousands and thousands of years. America was not discovered. Nobody discovered America. There was always a piece of land there, and people were living there. And those people were indigenous people, tribes, okay? So in the project that we're doing, this is a whole period of time from 1620 to 1765. So the taxes are money that you have to give to the government, right? So they put a lot of taxes. The British put taxes on the settlements, on everything that they were doing. Taxes on food, taxes on sending letters, taxes on doing anything. everything you did, everything you paid, part of that money was going back to the UK, to Britain. Did the people in the colonies like this? Do you think they liked the taxes?
No.
Not really. Why didn't they like the taxes?
Because it was their land, and then suddenly they were taken over by people that were trying to conquer everything, colonize everything, and it's just they're living there.
So the settlers are living there. They escaped Britain to have a new life, and now Britain is taking away their money, right? And can they complain to Britain? Do you think they can complain? They can say, I don't like this, I don't want this anymore. Can they say that? No, they're very far away. And they have no representation in the government. So they can't vote in any elections. They can't decide the laws. They can't do anything. They're a part of the British Empire, and they have no representation in the government. Okay? So these taxes became so high, and people got so angry at these taxes that they started fighting back. In Boston, there was this famous thing called the Boston Tea Party. And it sounds fun, right? It's a party, there's tea. But it wasn't a party. It was a boycott. It was this act in which the colonial people, the settlers in the colonies, they decided to throw away all the tea that the British were taking. So the British were going to take taxes and send tea, but take a lot of the money. So they decided, well, if we can't have it, if we have to pay so much, we're just going to throw it away. So they threw all of this tea into the water, and it disappeared. And the British got very angry, like, what do you think? Can you do anything? No, it's our money, it's our tea, you're part of us. So they started fighting. And this is when the Revolutionary War started. It was a war between the colonies of the United States and the British Empire. The British wanted to keep the United States as a colony, and the colonies were like, no, we want to be independent. We want to make our own rules and decide what taxes to put and who we should elect as president. Okay? And this is the Revolutionary War, lasted many years. It lasted from 1765 to 1783. Do you have a question? No? Okay. So it lasted a very long time. But at the beginning of this war, well, in the middle, in 1776, the United States made a letter that was called the Declaration of Independence. And that is when they said, we are independent, we are no longer a part of the British people, we are our own country. And the British said, no, you're not, so they went to war. Okay? But this is the date of independence in the United States, July 4th, 1776. Even though the British did not agree to independence until 1783, and even later in some cases. Okay? So this is the US Revolution. The US Revolution was a period of the colonies versus the United Kingdom, or the British colonies, the original 13 colonies that were fighting the British. Okay? So as you can see, the 13 colonies are all here in the east of the United States. In the east of the United States. And these are some of the original 13 colonies that are now states in the United States. Do you recognize any of these names? Which ones? New York. New York is a big one, a very important one. And New York was originally a Dutch colony. But then the British took over that Dutch colony. Do you recognize any others? North Carolina, Georgia. These are all states
Virginia.
that are very old, the oldest in the United States. So these are where the oldest cities in the United States are. But this is a small part of the United States. What was happening all over here? What do you think? Who was living all over here? The indigenous people. Yes. So when the settlers arrived here in the east, they started pushing the indigenous people further west. So the indigenous people started moving west, and some people wanted to discover new lands, to go to new lands. So settlers, some Europeans started going, but they didn't create big communities because not enough people were going. Why do you think not a lot of people were crossing the country? Why do you think?
There is no enough
Yeah?
people. Because it's hard.
It was?
Not enough people to go to
There weren't enough people to go, but why do you think people didn't want to go?
Because they already had a home, they were already settled. And
Yeah, life was easy here. People had arrived before, they had already done all the hard work of making houses, of creating communities, of creating roads, things like that. But were there roads over here? No. It was wild. It was the wilderness. It was the Wild West. And people didn't know what was out there. So it was dangerous. It was an adventure. So only some adventurous people were going over there. And as you said, like, the indigenous people were also being pushed over there. This is the map during the US Revolution. We'll see another map later. Okay? So we finish the US Revolution, the US becomes a country, and they elect their first president, George Washington. George Washington becomes president, and everything is okay. They start making laws. They start becoming a country. They start expanding, creating more settlements, more territories, going further west as time goes on. They have many presidents. But then there is a problem. And then comes the Civil War.